Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us for Growing Community in Ivanhoe tonight. We have just a first class panel of speakers tonight. We have Mr. Young from Young Family Farms. We have Tova also from the Ivanhoe Farmers Market, and Neil as well. And we also have Dina Newman coming in from the Center for Neighborhoods. All of these folks are champions for their neighborhood and also champions for urban agriculture here in Kansas City, Missouri. We're really excited to share this program with you tonight and explore how walking and biking and transit is also related to food access and neighborhood connections and strong communities. For some folks, it may not seem like an easy match, but by the end of this program, I think that we're going to be able to convince you that there is definitely a connection between food access and land use and walking and biking and transit and all of that kind of stuff that Bike Walk QC talks about all the time. So thank you all for joining us. We are recording this session, so if you would like to share it out or review it later, we'll send that link out tomorrow. We also have tonight, we are going to make this so that the live transcriptions are available. And I'm going to do that here in just a second. We'd love to have you talk back to us, whether that's in the chat or if you have a question. There's the little raise your hand button at the bottom of your screen. We'll do all of that here in just a bit. While I am getting the live transcription ready, I would like to invite the Youngs of Young Family Farm, Tova Tanner, Neil Rudisil of Ivanhoe Farmers Market, and Dina Newman of the Center for Neighborhoods. I'd love for you to introduce yourselves and share about your role in the neighborhood and your role in urban agriculture here in Kansas City. And I will go ahead and ask Mr. Young, can you kick us off, please?
Sure. Well, hello, everybody. It's good to take a few minutes away from working outside in the heat to get a good big glass of water and speak with some people that are of like mind. My position in the neighborhood is as a longstanding resident, a past neighborhood president, past board member. I am currently the managing director of housing and property for the Ivanhoe neighborhood. My other hat that I wear, of course, is Young Family Farm. I often say it's all Neil's fault that we have jumped in so deep, because he has been a mentor of ours since we started with the Ivanhoe Farmers Market maybe 10 years ago. And I think at that time, Dina was over the Ivanhoe Farmers Market. So it's partly her fault too, that we're doing all this work and working in all this heat. But we have a small urban farm on 39th and Wayne, if you are not aware. And we try to cater to the needs of the community. And we try to help some of the residents have questions often on market day. And so we try to help those that are starting their own gardens, or even some small urban farmers that are starting. So I don't want to talk your ears off. I'm better at answering questions. But thank you again for this opportunity to be here.
Well, I promise we will have lots of questions for you coming up. How about Dina? Can you tell us, introduce yourself and tell us who you are and how you got here?
Sure. So I'm Dina Newman, and I'm the director of the UMKC Center for Neighborhoods. We are a one-stop shop for all neighborhood leaders, advocates, and residents in the Kansas City, Missouri area. We help them build capacity through a 12-week free training program. We've had 10 cohorts. Our 11th cohort of neighborhood leaders will begin next month, and we had a record 51 applications this year. So the need and interest in folks stepping up and wanting to really take that, to the next level for neighborhood engagement is there. So we're really excited to have so many people who are interested in our program. I'm a little bit tied to Ivanhoe. Yeah, it's, I kind of got my start there with urban ag. And since then, so like Alan's wearing different hats, I'm also wearing a different hat. I'm the co-founder of Kansas City Black Urban Growers, Casey Bugs. And we founded that actually back in 2010. I was working with Catherine Kelly at the time. And just recently, just last month, I was able to incorporate Casey Bugs as a nonprofit organization. So we're kind of leveling up as well, because there's so much happening in the urban ag space, and I'm just really excited to be a part of it. And thank you again for allowing me to be here tonight.
Thank you, Dina. Congratulations on that nonprofit status for Casey Bugs. That's pretty incredible. Okay, so let's go with Tova. Tova, can you introduce yourself for us?
Hi, I'm Tova Tanner. I am the Farmers Market Manager for Ivanhoe Neighborhood Council. My role is to connect growers and artisans and creators to join us with the farmers market to bring something unique to the community. Outside of that, I am a small-time farmer as well. And so I work with youth, connecting their entrepreneurship endeavors with the growing community. So I am the person that you can connect with to get started in farmers market. So we help with giving them education about how to get started with the farmers market, what they need, and we supply everything else.
Thanks, Tova. And let's round it out with Neil.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Neil Rudisil, and I'm the Health Initiatives Manager for the Ivanhoe Neighborhood Council. And before I took that role, which Dina had previously to me, I was a resident of and I still am a resident of the neighborhood. And a quick little story, in 2012, I was riding my bicycle around the east side. I knew I wanted to buy a house. I knew I wanted to buy some land. And I found this perfect little spot on 36th and Woodland. And I rode my bike down there one day, and the owner of the house who I purchased the house from said, "You got to come to Ivanhoe. It sounds like you'd be interested in the Ivanhoe Neighborhood Council, their mission, their purpose, and everything." He took me to a meeting, and I walk in the door, and I'm met with this big table, urban agriculture. We've got a farmer's market. We grow our own food. We're putting the culture in agriculture. And I thought, this might be the place for me. And from then I met Dina and the Young family and everybody that was involved at the time in the Ivanhoe Neighborhood Council. And I just find it really astonishing and inspirational that a lot of these folks that brought me into the neighborhood are still in the neighborhood or still helping others develop outside of the neighborhood themselves, their farms. And it's a really interesting story for me to be a part of this still. So I work for the Ivanhoe Neighborhood Council. I'm also a small market gardener. The farm that I manage is called Woodland City on 36 in Woodland. I'm looking forward to a conversation today with all of you.
And I believe that Elena Henry is on the call today as well. Elena, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Let me get my video on here. My name is Elena, formerly Young, still Young, but Henry now. I am, of course, connected with Young Family Farm. Those are my parents, Alan and Yolanda, who started Young Family Farm. I am their eldest and their only daughter. And of course, I have to be their favorite because I'm the only girl. And so I recently moved back to Kansas City. I was born and raised here right in the Ivanhoe neighborhood. So it's very near and dear to my heart. recently moved back, have spent a lot of summers here and holiday seasons here, helping with various farm operations. I'm currently the operations manager, so I do a lot of things, including social media for the farm. And then in my day job and my night job, I'm a mom, and I also serve job seekers. I'm a professional resume writer. And so I do a lot of writing and working with folks who are looking to advance in their careers. So I have a lot of different hats, and I stay glued to my phone for that reason. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the chat.
Thanks, everyone. I feel like wearing a lot of hats is a common theme amongst folks who are involved with urban agriculture. It seems like this is a passion and a purpose for sure, but it maybe doesn't always pay every bill. Is that the case? I see a lot of heads nodding. So let's get started. I first want to kind of dive into the history of the Ivanhoe neighborhood. And I think that this is probably going to kick us off with a question for Mr. Young, for Alan. Tell us, kind of walk us through a bit of the history of the Ivanhoe neighborhood, and especially how it seemed to develop into a unique urban agricultural hub almost for Kansas City.
Well, I'll try to be quick and probably encapsulate 40 years in the span of about 2 minutes. But the Ivanhoe neighborhood, the boundaries, if you're not aware, 31st Street to the north, Emmanuel Cleaver to the south, to the east is Prospect, and to the west is Paseo. Very large neighborhood right in the center of the city, some 474 city blocks. At the time that I moved in the neighborhood back in 1987, there were 13,000 residents. The average income was about $16,000. As of the last census, there are about 6,500 residents in Ivanhoe, and the average income is about $25,000. So my wife and I, when we first moved in this neighborhood, because of the ills in the neighborhood, we worked to restart the neighborhood organization. So we kind of started at square one back in 1991. Not that I was trying to rhyme on purpose, but we restarted the neighborhood. There were a lot of longtime residents here in Ivanhoe that had suffered through the worst of the times, which was in the late 80s and early 90s. And so the neighbors came together and we came up with a strategic plan. And that plan was 100 different changes that the residents wanted to see in their neighborhood. And one of those changes was help with neighborhood, or not neighborhood, but help with residents who wanted to have a garden in their backyard. And so out of that community change came the health initiatives and came the farmers market over time. And it kind of spawned several of the urban farms. So that's kind of a quick roadmap through how we got to where we are now. Kind of resident driven, resident led.
That was a very quick 40 years. So resident driven, resident led, the urban agriculture was on the list of 100 changes that the neighborhood wanted to see. That's really ambitious. 100 changes. How did you tackle things like that?
Yeah, and those changes were split among about 4 or 5 different areas. Crime and safety was one of those. Youth and family was another area. The health initiative was one, beautification. So there were several areas that those changes were spread out amongst. And as one item may have been achieved or addressed, we wanted that to be a living document where we could add on additional things as they became relevant. So again, the farmers market kind of grew out of the residents having or help or getting help at their house. And then it became apparent that some people didn't have the land. And so the land that Mr. Nutter had given us right next to the building became individual plots that people could rent. And we were blessed to have first Dina and then Neil to kind of champion that effort. And so a lot of this has kind of grown over time from that initial neighborhood plan.
So do you, you said that the list of 100 requests for the neighborhood, is that still a living document that's still, do you still get that out from time to time now?
Typically, at least for sure before COVID hit, every year in the end of the year between October and December, we would go through that document or go through those changes and revisit them and see, had we really done anything? What do we need to do in other areas? So I would say yes, up until probably 2020, when we had to shut down for a short time because of COVID.
Yeah, and I think we can all agree that it's been a little bit tricky to restart some of the things that were going really strong before everything shut down. I think we can all be sympathetic to that for sure. Dina, I kind of want to hear some more about this relationship between, you know, what the community values. So like that list of 100 items and land use in a community.
You know, Ivanhoe was pretty unique in that they had the foresight to really get that neighborhood plan way back when. You know, my service area here in Kansas City is working with the Center for Neighborhoods. There's over 240 neighborhood associations in Kansas City, and that's our service area. And some neighborhoods are just now developing their neighborhood plans. Like I said, Ivanhoe was kind of the, you know, forefront of that. And people are starting to look at the community, at their assets, as Ivanhoe did way back when. And at the time, Ivanhoe, one of their main assets was they had lots of vacant land. The neighborhood had the foresight to actually buy those lots early on. I'm hearing now, you know, I remember, you know, 10 years ago, whatever, you could get a lot for $25. They would almost like give it to you. And now some of these same lots and some of these same communities are going for $25,000 and up, right? So yeah, it's you know, what I think what drives what the community chooses to do with their land. Often the community dictates how community is going to decide what to do to the land by their values, right? So some neighborhoods you can drive through and it looks like art is a value, a community value. So you may drive through a neighborhood and see lots of murals or sculpture, right? Other communities, you may see more parks because that's what the community values. I'm thinking about like in Blue Hills Neighborhood Association. So they took 4 vacant lots here recently and just had a grand opening, I don't know, a few weeks ago on Kissick Park, a little pocket park. But they worked on that for years. You know, a lot of this work takes time and it takes years. I think of Gregory Ridge, Carl Stafford took a vacant lot and he's an artist. So he's recreated this art space where people can go and, you know, get involved with art. So again, I think if you're doing true, authentic community engagement with the folks who live in the community, their values will dictate, you know, what is needed in their community. With Ivanhoe, and I'm sure Neil could speak to it more than I can, it was a food desert. You know, we actually say food swamp. You could get lots of unhealthy food in the community, but a full service grocery store was not there. So I think that could be part of the reason that, you know, the urban ag in Ivanhoe kind of took off, because it was like, okay, this is fresh, affordable, accessible food right here in the community that we can grow our own, and we'll know where our own food is coming from.
I think that's really impactful. I was at Young Family Farm this weekend, and before I even got at the gate, I was stopped by one of your customers on the sidewalk, and this was her first time to Young, and she was gushing about how excited she was to be able to get fresh, healthy food in her neighborhood. She said, I didn't have to drive very far. It was people who welcomed me with open arms. And I'd love to hear more from the Youngs about whether this is from Elena or Mr. Young. If you could tell us about the conversations that you have with each other about the connection between growing food and nurturing your community or nurturing your neighbors.
Well, one of the things that's important to all of us, and we do have a meeting amongst ourselves after every market, is we try to look at how can we make it more than just coming and buying something? How can we make it an experience for people that are coming? And it gets as minute as where we set tables up, and what does it look like when people walk in the gates? What are they seeing? And so we focus on making it more of an experience in addition to buying, but we also try to treat people in a way that they used to yesteryear. When my parents talk about how when they went to the store and how the store owner treated them and how those that were working treated them. And so we also try to incorporate that in with what we do. So we try to make it an experience. We try, and those stories of hearing people leave gushing, I'm glad to hear that. We work very hard to make that happen. And we, even with training of those that are working for us part-time, and how important treating the customers is. And a lot of times when we have a first-time customer, we'll ask if we don't recognize her, is this first time here? And we make sure that we do something extra special for them. And so we just try to make it an enjoyable experience. I don't think there's any magic. Most of us, when we go to a store, we hate to be ignored, but we hate to have someone follow us around when we're shopping. And so there's a balance. And so we try to strike a good balance. That's what we make efforts to do. Elena may be able to add something more than what I've said.
I mean, I think you summarized it well, and those of you who know me know that I can talk and talk and talk and talk. So I will try to add a little 2 cents without sort of repeating. But I think, like what my father said, one of our goals and our missions is to make sure that we're really cultivating the relationship, because that we believe, out of the relationship, we can potentially inspire others to get started with their own growing efforts from home, and kind of remove the disconnect and the transactional nature that has sort of taken over how we view food and really how we view the world around us. We have become, I think, so consumer driven, and this is not me just like pointing at everyone else. I'm a part of it as well. We are driven by the consumption, the passive consumption of things. And so much of what sort of binds us together naturally has been lost over time. And I think when we look out at society and we think, where have we gone wrong with a lot of things? I think it's really that true connection with another and empathy with other people and their experiences. And so we try to ensure that in what we do, not just as a family with staff and volunteers, but also when customers come to see us, that they really feel that connection and they really feel that we genuinely are excited to have them there. And it's not just, hey, we want your money, which of course having the money is great, buying our produce is great, but that we are interested in engaging with them and getting to know who they are. And I think that is why folks enjoy coming to our location. And I think why other people are considering joining this sort of revolution, so to speak. They feel that connection that comes from knowing your grower, knowing your food, and engaging on that personal level.
That really speaks to something that we talk about at Bike Walk KC all the time, is that the way we build our cities either connects people or it divides people. And if we are building our cities where we, like Dina was saying, we show what we value in our neighborhoods, whether that's art or parks or urban agriculture. If we build our cities to highlight those kinds of things, it connects the people, right? And if we build our cities in a way that excludes people or that makes people feel unwelcome or unsafe, then that is going to divide us. Yeah. If we don't give people the access that they need to be able to walk down to the farmer's market and get their groceries, and they still have to get in their car and, you know, drive 3 miles away in a relatively small city to go get their food, then that's going to divide. That's going to make people feel excluded and isolated. Such great points. Okay, so I want to talk more about these health initiatives and kind of where. So Dina kind of gave us the foundation of how we started with the health initiatives. Tova, if you can you tell us a little bit more about how the health initiatives have evolved in Ivanhoe more recently?
So, you know, Liz, you and I had a conversation, talked about a lot of different things around food, Ivanhoe, transportation, and quality of life. And so that has always popped up in my mind, quality of life, quality of life. So off the top of my mind, I have an example of my understanding of what quality of life is. You know, my father used to always say, you know, live off the fat of the land. And sometimes when I used to hear that, I would think, grow food and enjoy the fruits of your labor. But that statement, living off the fat of the land, is really to live very well by enjoying the best things that are available without having to work hard to get those things. So with that being said, I take that and share that with everything I do. So in this capacity of managing the market, I establish a lot of relationships between farmers, vendors, again, artisans, makers, and growers. And I also work with youth to connect that as well. So I open that statement up, living off the fat of the land, and I apply that to different facets in my life. So I enjoy being in the space of Ivanhoe. I too will have an urban farm being introduced to the neighborhood of 35th and Olive here soon. And so in that capacity, I'll say through communication, you know, before coming, being accepted with Ivanhoe neighborhood associations, I've learned a wealth of knowledge from Neil, you know, having that, the history of the neighborhood, the growing food, seeing how those urban farms have connected with each other and really kind of brought something different and unique in the 3rd district. So I'm just happy to share the space with everyone here, for those who was here before me and here now, and just seeing what the future holds.
Thanks, Tova. That sounds like, I think that living off the fat of the land, I think that as human beings, I think that ease and rest and abundance are something that when we work together, we can all share those. And I love that idea. Love the concept. So I'm going to drop in a poll here, because we're talking a lot about building community at the farmers market and building community with urban growers and makers. So I am going to give us a poll. And I want to know if you guys can raise your hands, however that works, with the little reactions button, or if you want to raise your hands in your camera. How many of you visit a farmer's market at least a couple of times a year? I'll make this real easy. If you've been a couple times this year, let me see. Yay. Mr. Young is like, every single day, I live it. Okay, and now I'm going to launch this poll, and you can tell me, what do you value about your farmer's market? And I put a couple of choices in here, but if I missed something and you value something else that I didn't think of, please add it to the chat. And I'll leave this up here for just a few more seconds. All right, here we go. So I'm sharing the results. And I love it. That's great to hear. Thank you. I think that about half of us here today are presenting, and so we weren't able to answer. But if you're presenting today and you didn't get to participate, go ahead and tell us in the chat, or you can just open up your mic and just tell us with your voice.
I would say for me, it's the seeing community come together with all the unique gifts and talents that they bring. You know, we have the vegan events that come through to the markets, and they have nutritional things. We have a young entrepreneur that comes and he has all the fun, exciting candies, sweets, and snacks. And then we have the growers that come and has the fresh vegetables. So it gets pretty lonely at the information booth where I hang out at the whole market. So I love when people come up, socialize, tell me how, you know, how they love coming to Ivanhoe Farmers Market, how they seen change come, and how they would like to see us more. So that's always exciting for me.
And I'll jump in, Liz. I actually enjoy the entrepreneurship. That was one of your choices, I believe. And that's one thing that doesn't get talked about enough about the Ivanhoe community and the Ivanhoe Farmers Market. It's not just about agriculture. In fact, we have so much neighborhood entrepreneurship over the course of the last decade, since at least I've been here, that people have actually needed the support of our farmers market, right? They needed the support to come to market where we supply the tents and the tables, and we have a market manager, and we'll swipe your EBT, or we'll swipe your credit card or whatever for you. So we make it really easy for you to come. All you have to do is come with whatever good or service that you're interested in promoting. And so even if you only distribute one shirt at that market and you sell it for 20 bucks or whatever, you didn't have to pay any money to come to market. And I think that's one thing that we're not talking about enough of about the neighborhood. It's not just the food production. We have people that, and of those growers, people have utilized the market to, as Mr. Young has talked to me about, sort of graduate out of it, in a sense that you've become an entity that maybe needs to go to a bigger stage, if you will. And so we're encouraged by that, right? It also sometimes that support can hurt the market too, but the market's very flexible. The Ivanhoe Farmers Market's very flexible, and it has support from a lot of different sources, so it can do that. But it's been very interesting to watch growers come and they say, oh, I've never done this before. Here's my 4 cabbages. Okay, great. And over the years, they've grown their system to the point that they're out at Overland Park Farmers Market. Now, we can discuss if that's the right place to go or not. That's another conversation, right? That's a conversation we should have at some point in time. But people, you know, need to start, they produce so much that they need to distribute more. Or they've gotten tapped, or they to go to another event, or they've built their own storefront, like City Roots has done. City Roots is a native plant nursery, and they've actually, bought some land up 2 blocks from the market. And so they're open on Saturdays naturally. Would we love to have City Roots in the market on Saturdays selling their plants? Absolutely. But it's also nice to be able to tell people, you know, go down the street and check them out, or go down the street and check the Young Family Farm out. And so we're really attempting here in this neighborhood, which is, I think, very unique, and I don't hear about it anywhere else, is we have a centralized farmers market, and then we have a corridor of food entrepreneurship where those spaces are high-level spaces that, as the Youngs just mentioned, create their own farmers market on a Saturday as well. So it not only do, like your poll asked if you know what your favorite part of the market is, and for me, it's being able to curate and help develop young entrepreneurs. And Tova's done actually a terrific job with that over the last couple of years. She's brought several people to our organization. They've utilized the shared use kitchen to bottle lemonade, and they started selling at storefronts, I believe. Nadine started to after a year here. So, you know, we've actually in the tamale kitchen, we've actually seen people come through here with an idea, develop it, and then we don't hear from them again. You know, and you think that would hurt our feelings, and we try not to let it. We're trying to be happy for everybody to be successful, and then look for the new entrepreneur. And I will end on this. That only happens because we have philanthropic support, vendor support, and customer support. The Ivanhoe Farmers Market needs all three of those things to be the success that it's been. It wouldn't be a success without either one of those legs of its stool, if you will. And the philanthropic support allowed us to say, okay, maybe vendors aren't going to be as consistent as we'd like them to be, but hey, they're learning how to be vendors. And so we've been cool with that. But those three things have really kept the market going over these years.
One thing I think that Neil maybe left out of that was the work that Neil did and the vision that he had to take the small Ivanhoe Farmers Market that met in the parking lot of the building up to the Lamp campus, and with the kitchen that was added on to provide a place for farmers to prepare some of the foods that they had grown so that they could sell them processed foods at the market also. But it was a lot of work and a lot of years that Neil put into helping that market become a reality.
Well, I'll end this part of the conversation. I appreciate it, Mr. Young, but that's the interesting thing about this market is it's had a lot of different identities. And I just think it's just so inspirational that it's been able to maintain over the course of different managers and different leaders and different vendors and different days, different times, different locations. It's a marketing nightmare. We have 4 addresses at this campus. You know what I mean? So it's been able to overcome all of that and really still be an asset for this community. So I think all of us that's been a part of it over the years are extremely proud of that.
So it sounds to me like this is a success story about an idea that the neighborhood had, and they acted on it. And because it's a community-led initiative, whatever that means, so growing your own food or health initiatives, because it started in the neighborhood, it has continued and grown and blossomed and is thriving in the neighborhood. And there are key players that are keeping it going that have been there for a long time, but you also have new neighbors that are buying into this idea of I think you call it the Woodland Greenway, right? Of a neighborhood or a stretch of urban farms and you know, neighborhood entrepreneurs that are keeping it going. I want to talk just a little bit more about the history of Ivanhoe and the changes over time. So this question is for folks who have, I guess, the whole team, but tell us especially about your relationships with your neighbors and how they have changed over time because of the urban agriculture. And I might pick on Mr. Young and Elena to get this one kicked off.
Well, we had always somewhat been aware and been communicating with our neighbors that surround us. But we realized that to have a garden at the scale that we grow right next to your house may not be something that the resident would have been looking forward to. So we always try to make sure that we're mindful if we're going to have a delivery of what time it is and the amount of noise that we have that goes on our farm. We try to be mindful of the residents as far as that timing. And then in addition to that, those residents that are right next to someplace that we're growing, we try to make sure every now and then we just show up at their house with a big bag of stuff. And so it's kind of again a throwback to the old days. And so we try to make them also have a benefit of us having some place we're growing on right next to their house. We have found we have to be judicious with our use of animal manures to be really pointed. So you know, a funny story real quick. We had just put chicken manure, pelletized, not supposed to smell at all, over about 10 beds. So that's about 600 square feet. And there's a bus stop right next to our main garden area. And so I was out there and I saw a couple of people that were waiting on the bus. They were just kind of sniffing, saying, what in the world is that smell? And so things like that have made me be more mindful of how I do things and when I do things. So we maintain a good relationship with those that live around the garden. Most of them, you know, they'll say, hey, let me know when you got those tomatoes. So we'll just take them tomatoes, you know, sometimes when we get them. So we, even with the mailman comes by, he wants, hey, you got any cabbage? Well, last time I saw him, we just shoved a big one in his mail sack. So that's kind of how we do things. It's kind of the family values that we have had that we try to relate to our neighbors in that same way.
And I just wanted to add one small little thing, sort of dovetailing off of the point that my dad was just making with the story of the mailman. I think an expanded, so for me, an expanded sort of definition or view of what it means to have a neighbor. I think it's easy to kind of view neighbor as someone who lives in immediate proximity to you and not really think about like bigger, the community and even folks outside of your neighborhood, quote unquote, are neighbors. And I think with having the garden and having more and more folks becoming aware of what we're doing here, we have so many more folks who approach us and connect with us as neighbors, right? Folks are like, yeah, I was driving by, I go to work down here and I live over there and I saw your tomatoes, and we get to have great conversations. And folks tell us about their life, and we hope to continue to foster those connections. We're trying to find ways, during our market to encourage that type of connection. I know that that's something that happens during Ivanhoe Farmers Market as well. I have fond memories traveling back from Texas or Indianapolis or wherever I was, being at the farmers market next to Woodland City's table, feeling outshined by their beautiful produce, but connecting with all of the folks that show up. And again, that idea that you mentioned, Liz, that connection and making people feel like things are accessible kind of drives relationship, and people feel like, hey, all of you are my neighbors, not just the person who lives, right next door.
And then Liz, I guess I'll just add, I'm not from the east side of Kansas City, if you can believe it or not. And when I came into the neighborhood and decided to do urban agriculture, I purchased my property. And then before I did any of the infrastructure development, I went around to the neighbors and chatted with them about what I was going to do. And it was a long period. I had to redo the house first. So I had a good year to kind of like really build relationships with the neighbors. And they all thought I was crazy, of course. And I described them I had it all planned out. I'm going to have a high tunnel here. What's a high tunnel? What's a high tunnel? It's going to look like this. I'm going to do this and that. And they all said, okay, we're okay with it. And then since they all were so gracious to allow me to redevelop that corner, for every major investment that impacted my neighbor, I made an investment in their property. And so when I put up my high tunnel, for example, the neighbor to my north, I blocked her view a little bit. And that was a discussion on like how I was going to position the high tunnel. And so we came to an agreement about the placement of it. And then I removed some trees for her in the back of her property. And then across the street, when we moved across the street to do that garden, the neighbor needed tree removal. And then we helped her build her own garden because of course her and her kids wanted to garden in my farm. And if anybody knows me, I don't really like people in the farm. I'm the opposite of the Young Family Farm, by the way. They encourage community participation. I usually keep people at the edges. But I built them. My point is, I built them a garden space, a really nice little space, you know, and gave them irrigation techniques and things like that to try to make their space good. And another neighbor, I planted a tree line of fruit trees with the Giving Grove, you know, because I wanted the trees there, and I said, hey, if we plant them and get them going, you know, you guys can have all the fruit. So anyway, I know that not everybody was in love with all the things that I was about to do, but I think they thought the use of the space was better than it was before I got there. And then now that I'm here, I've been here 10 years, I have relatively the same neighbors. I'm very fortunate to have a lot of stability on my block. They could take or leave some of it, if you want me to be honest with you. You know, I know May only likes green tomatoes. Everything else she could care less about. I know, you know, the McDonald's, they'll take whatever you want, whenever you want to give it, whatever it looks like, right? Sandra only likes, I mean, you know what I mean? So it's not as if everybody wants everything. I kind of know now when to surprise people with what. And then they also know that, you know, at any point in time, they can come and knock on the door and you know, if they need something for an event or something like that. So again, I try to ask permission and then I try to reinvest around me as well.
I guess I have three parts to my story of relationships because I'm in a capacity of building a farm. So I can speak from that angle. Also having to the responsibility of last year growing at the camp, the LAMP campus. And so I had relationship with other people that like to walk through and see what we were growing. So I adapted a lot of conversation around that piece as well. And then you have the farmers market. From my experience with neighbors, I am closer to Prospect, our lots are. And so there's a lot more blight happening where our location is. And we have a lot of kind of drug activity, prostitution happening. So we are trying to introduce, you know, the farm to the neighborhood. And as we've gotten started, we've been having some issues, but we're working through it. Richardson School has been very supportive. They want programming for their youth once we get started. The Kansas City Community Gardens, we were awarded a water grant. So our neighbor next to us allows us to pull water from his unit so we can start growing. However, we wanted to test the waters to see how, you know, the community was going to accept us. So we had our rabbits. My husband has giant chinchillas and a variety of rabbits that he breeds and use for the garden as well. Well, they were kind of destroying some of our things there. So that's kind of back and forth, but we're not going to stop. We're going to keep, you know, revising the plan and seeing how we can approach the situation to make it better. However, on the flip side, we do have, like I said, growing on the LAMP campus has been a great experience for my 4 children, 13, 7, 6, and 4. They love growing. The neighbors love seeing us to come, and they notice everything that we do, and we have a great connection. And again, with the Ivanhoe Farmers Market, I get to meet neighbors that, you know, started the market. They come and talk to me, and new people that's never been to the market. So I get a variety, a good mix of, you know, people and relationships in the 3rd district.
And I'll just kind of round it out and say, I just think about the real early days of the Growing in Ivanhoe project and the market and, the lot just north of the building. It was a 1/3 acre, and working with the master gardeners. And at the time, so gosh, this was like 2011, 2012, plowing up that vacant lot and pulling up all that stuff that had been buried in and getting the soil ready to do this demonstration garden. And at the time, the neighbors were just kind of like, this was new, this was different. And we didn't have a fence that early on. And we had to deal with, telling the story, explaining what was happening in the community. I remember one story, there were some boys that lived around the corner and they were just constantly getting in the garden, said we want greens and, just literally pulling the greens up by the root and, but it was an opportunity to teach. And by the time, like a year later, the boys called themselves the Garden Boy Posse group. And these were just some little neighborhood boys. But I tell you, they took an interest. I remember Mr. Clee, who's the custodian, came over one time and told me the boys are out in the garden. Again, it was an opportunity to teach them. And I'll never forget, one Sunday I got a call because they had my cell number and they said, somebody's over here in our garden. And it was like they had been riding their bikes, riding around, and they took ownership of that garden. So, fast forward now to what is happening over there from when we first started with 2 vendors, Eileen and Francine, and my cousin was selling jewelry in the parking lot, to see what has evolved. Oh my gosh, it just, sometimes I just drive through the neighborhood and almost cry because it is just, Neil and Tova and the Young family, the things that happen. And like I said, we started with a really small seed, and just to see how this thing has just taken off is just amazing. And I'm really, really pleased. I thank God that I played a small part in the role of it.
Well, does anybody else have goosebumps? My arm hairs are just standing straight up on end. I love to hear this story, and I've heard bits and pieces of it from all of our panelists tonight. I love to hear the story over and over because I think it demonstrates how when people step out of their homes and say hello to their neighbors and then expand, as Elena was saying, their definition of neighbors to the people who maybe live a few blocks over, or maybe they've never seen before in their life, and welcome them into their space. What kinds of incredible things we can grow together. I think that this is a great success story, and I really hope that other communities and other neighborhoods and other individuals, right, because it started with just a few people coming together and wanting to make a difference in the place that they lived. I hope that this is really inspirational and instructional as well. So not just that we're all getting goosebumps from a really happy story, but we take the lessons that we've learned tonight and we go home and apply them where we live. So we are just about out of time. We had several questions submitted through the registration tonight, but honestly, I think that just in conversation, we pretty well answered them all. I was kind of taking a look at the themes of the questions and the themes of our conversation, and I think we pretty well covered it. If you have a question that didn't get covered tonight, I invite you to send me an email. My email is info@bikewalkkc.org, and we'll see if we can't get that answered for you. Please keep in touch. I'll send that follow-up email out tomorrow, and go find all of these folks and their organizations or their businesses. Find them on social media. We linked a few of the links in the chat earlier, and I'll send those out as well in the follow-up email. Find them on social media. Go see them at the market on Saturday. Bike Walk KC has an event for Bike Walk KC members. It's going to be on Saturday, and we are going to ride from the offices to Young Family Farms, to the Ivanhoe Farmers Market, and back to the office, our office again. I know it is going to be the hottest day of a very hot week, but we're going to get started early. Young Family Farms is lovely and shady, and somehow they have a constant breeze. I don't know how they get it, but they are perfectly positioned for just a slight breeze in the shade at all times. And then when we get to Ivanhoe Farmers Market, also a lovely place to be, just a joy and a pleasure. And we're going to go to that farm to table kitchen that you see in Neil's background for some market fresh snacks that we've got from our local growers. And we're going to sample those, and the farm to table kitchen is air conditioned. So we're gonna end our little bicycle tour with that. So Amy's got the links there for you in the chat. I hope some of you are able to join us. All of you are able to join us. That would be wonderful. And this isn't going to be the last time that you hear from Bikewatt KC and the Ivanhoe Farmers Market. I think that there is more yet to be said, and there are more people to introduce as neighbors, right? Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. Mr. Young, Elena, Dina, Tova, Neil, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you all for being with us. And to our guests as well, our audience tonight, thanks for joining us. Thank you for believing me when I said that there was a connection between the work that we talk about all of the time and the work that folks in Ivanhoe are doing with urban agriculture. I told you, it really is a thing. We will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night.